Thank you for having me. Let me quickly introduce myself. I'm Marco Möller, one of the co-founders of Pionix and the CEO. And I'm also head of the technical steering committee of the open source project EVerest. I would love to explain you what we do, and I think we had quite some successes and often got asked, how have you done it? And I would love to dive into that. So let's first start with, let's say, this standard pitch. What do we do and why do we do that? So we are in the EV charging industry. And there's a famous issue this industry had, and that's quality. 10 to 25% of the charging session fails. And if you break it down to the vendor statistics, even the best vendors are at 9-ish%. So it's not that this is bad on average, everyone is bad. And so basically, at the moment, the industry has not found the silver bullet to fix this. And if you project this to the future, there will be billions of vehicles. We will need billions of charging stations, and all of that has to be interoperable. Every charging station vendor, every car, every backend component, every app. And the issues we see, which lead to this big failure rate, is interoperability. Second, maintenance, getting the right spare part at the right moment in time to the right location. Then we have a lot of stranded assets. So this industry is young, and there's a lot of companies rising, but also falling. Sometimes you invested millions in assets, and then there's no maintenance, no support more next days. And software quality from the beginning. Those are partly great electrical companies, but building a software that scales is hard, and not everyone is really good at that. How the industry currently tries to resolve that is by standardization. This is a rough abstract of the different standards and the different swim lanes over time, what got added. And by the way, added. Old stuff is never removed. So over time, we're stacking up PDF on PDF document. I think there's already 20,000 pages. What you have to take into account if you want to build a charging station, which scales on more than one niche. At the same time, the standards are competing. You have super slow adoption on those standards. For example, this OCPP 1.6 from 2012 is still at, 80% market share, and finally get it faded out, so after 13 years. And the replacement is also there for 10 years already. So this is slow, and it's a waste of resources, as everyone has to implement all of that. And it's, basically, if everyone implements the same stuff, you get deviation, everyone does it slightly different, you get different dialects. Maybe my dialect and the Scotsman, maybe we'll have issues understanding each other, even though we're claiming both to speak English. And the same with those machines who try to communicate over those protocols. And the reality is even worse. This is a poster. I have some copies with me if you want to have one, or you can download that via the QR code. So this is our current understanding of what you have to do to build charging stations on the different regions. And we don't think that's a solution. The moment everyone says, like, this is ridiculous, we should add another standard, then everything will be great, but the outcome is just more issue. So we should do something different, right? Our solution we're propagating is the open source project EVerest, so harmonizing all charging station vendors over time on one middleware, one software framework, which is super flexible from home wall boxes to superchargers, which can cover all of that needs, and takes care of the commodity. What I just showed you on this big poster, because it's on the poster, it's by definition commodity. You can't win by implementing that, because your competition has to do the same. So no one is so super motivated. You maybe can get some advantages if you 1 year earlier than someone else, but at the end of the day, this is nothing which sets you apart from the competition. So harmonizing that on a joint software foundation is great, and that's what we do. You could, in theory, do that, the Microsoft Windows approach, proprietary, but no one will adopt that. No one will go voluntarily into a monopole, into a classical one. But with open source, the Android of charging, I sometimes call it, you don't have that issue. And over time, fast forward, we now, depending on the counting, the LFX tool is on different moments in time giving different results. I think at 75 contributing organizations, roughly 1,000 professionals who work on that. Here, some of the logos who contributed / officially working with us, but behind the scenes, we're more or less working with every car OEM, with a lot of charging station vendors. with standardization bodies, with governments, with universities, charge point operators, component makers. Just to give you some example how widespread this are, we got last year's from the previous US government indirectly quite some contributions. They spent, I think, millions to Accenture to help working on Everest. At the same time, the Chinese government is spending money to companies to implement their standards in open source and make sure also those cars can be charged by Everest. And I think this is a perfect global alliance, actually. And the outcome of all of that, I just took that screenshot yesterday. This LF Energy tool sets can estimate the value of an open source project. I was curious where we stand, and it's kind of 10x more than a year ago I checked. It's like $500 million. I'm not sure if that is true, but that's what this tool claims, and that's 56% of all LF Energy. So I'm also myself like, what the fuck, what have we done here? To comparing, I think number one project on LFX is Kubernetes, and this is just 4 billion, so just 10x more. And that is the biggest project LF Linux Foundation at all has. You also see on a logarithmic plot, we are catching up with a tremendous growth rate on deployed chargers with Everest compared to the market. And so I think we did something right there. And let's try to find out what this is. End of the day, our slogan is one stack to charge them all. We really want to get this universal software for all those different needs. Just to wrap up, why am I doing this as a company? We see Everest at the beginning. It's de-risking my customer base. It generates a wide adoption. And I am adding services on top of that. So helping customers with deploying engineers if they need that, adding service level agreements, support and maintenance, helping with certification. Before, we also did something like a maintained enterprise edition. Honestly, for the moment, that took off way too slow, so we adjusted our strategy a bit. And then we're adding also enterprise products on top, like cloud services, like hardware modules. So the normal presentation ends here, but today I don't do that. So I have 2 swim lanes. If someone is interested in open source, go there. If you're interested in Pionix, go there. So always wearing these hats and super transparent, like no one has to pay me, only if you need help. But why have we done open source and how has it worked? So let's go to the bonus material. Myself, I started in the Jugendforscht community in Germany, which is I think STEM competition for young students, and I have a really, really big network of those freaks. We created out of that network a company, I think actually many companies. For example, the German Facebook was also created by a friend of mine from that network. And we created a drone company, sold it to Intel 2016, worked a while in the drone space with Intel, got overrun by open source. So our drone was great, but open source was just greater. And we tried to catch up, too little, too late. And 3 years later, Intel shut down the drone unit. So all fine with me, no bad feelings, was an interesting journey. And then we did some consulting, looking around how we can help mid-sized companies. We stumbled over EV charging. Someone asked us, help me to build a charger. And like, look, this is all standards. Everyone is doing the same. Oh, wait a minute. Sooner than later, this will become open source. So why not it be us? So we had started a company with that idea in mind like 4.5 years ago. And there's a famous saying from Marc Andreessen, as software eats the world, open source eats software. So in our opinion, over time, all software will become commoditized / open sourced. So the question is, can be you doing that, or it can be someone else? If you have something to lose, it might be hard doing that step. If you, like us, don't have anything to lose because we have no legacy business, it's easy to step into that. So our 3-step master plan. Unleash an open source tsunami, ride the wave, and then iterate on ideas to make money. And we have a lot of ideas, but you also see we're also alternating and improving here. So what ingredients we thought we need for doing this? We want to develop the world-leading software stack for our industry. And we thought like only world-leading, like this harmonization, is solving the technical problem. But no one will do the harmonization if we're proprietary. So solving this problem is intrinsic to the industry, and open source is the only solution. So we said like, okay, we want to do go all in with open source, not just open source flavors like a library here and an API there, but just everything. I'm talking a million lines of code here. So we said like, this number, I forgot to update that. We said like speed is important. We can't just bootstrap that and sprinkle in money. We have to go all in. So we convinced a couple of venture funds. I think meanwhile we even spent more than 8 million into EVerest. It's hard to guesstimate, but it's a lot of money. So just for my company, like 50 man years plus, no more, 80 man years, and we are not the only one investing in this. We also looked around if there's any other open source around there where we can build on top. We found a little, talked to those people, have not been interested to collaboration, so we just started from scratch. First thing we have to take into account is licensing. I think we heard that on the panel before. Permissive licensing is great for our goal. I often have been criticized by other open source projects like, yeah, we're doing our stuff here and it's also worthy and don't discriminate GPL. I'm not doing that. There are benefits on GPL, like you're forcing people to contribute, which maybe lead to a healthy ecosystem. On the other hand, if you can't get people in the first place because they're afraid of GPL, it's hard to get started. So we plan to grow fast and quick and accepted that we might getting less contributions, and actually I don't see that, and went in with Apache 2.0, also with the help of Linux Foundation to pick that license. I think initially we started with MIT and then we pivoted after some weeks. And we have the Linux Foundation. Without repeating your slide, Alex, here, but it was for us really crucial to have this enterprise framework and trusted third neutral party around us who can help us to build such an ecosystem. Just a startup with a GitHub account is no open source community. And also a corporate with a GitHub account is no open source community in my opinion. So doing it right, we also went all in here. I think we got accepted late 21, officially released January 22. So with an LF Energy, we're now 3.5, 4 years-ish. And we needed management. And meanwhile, you see here how we see the world from our perspective, how this is structured. There's a lot of layers from governing board of LF Energy, where I'm meanwhile part of. There's technical advisory committee, the EV charging special interest group, then our technical steering committee, different working groups. Because we're so large, we had to break down the work by swim lanes in order to collaborate. On one monthly meeting, you can't do that. So we have weekly meetings on swim lanes. And we have our own vulnerability management team in order to perform also their right. Yeah, and what else do we need? Looking on the outside, on the industry, and I think this is the most important view. Honestly, I'm very little on open source conferences because I don't want to build an open source project because of the sake of open source. I don't want to sell an industry's talents. So the typical conferences I go is e-mobility conferences. Teach them about open source, but this is just the icing on the cake. I actually want to have a problem solved. So I go where my demand is. And actually, the demand is wide. So in the middle of all of this, there's a charger OEM. And there's a lot of different personas. And I think this surrounding is super important because that's your network, that are your lines, these are your pull and push factors. Our business development, so our sales goes after those companies, given. Also, governments can be your alliance. They're creating new standards. They're looking on how to accelerate those standards, like the US government, like the Chinese government. Still waiting for someone from Europe to sponsor this. So if you know someone, let me know. Also, you can go with the customers of your customers, going to the utilities, to the charge point operators. Tell them, like, look, do you want to have stranded assets? You want to lock in on one vendor? Or you want to be flexible and be able to have something what scales, what is very easy for you to integrate, to customize, and we get all the flexibility. I just learned from one really, really big CPO, they're spending $10 million a year on compliance tests of their supply chain. Because every some weeks there are software releases. This is nuts, and with that you can for sure, just with replacing EVerest and some of the vendors, you can cut down that significantly. So that alone could sponsor this project from this one charge point operator. You can also convince the open source community. End of the day, if an engineer goes into field, the first thing everyone is doing is like Googling, what open source components can I use to scale this? And you want to be found there. You want to create this community and this push through the engineers. And last but not least, going to the component suppliers, to the charge point management systems, to the car OEMs, so all the tech which has to be compatible with our tech. Because for them, end of the day, especially if you build hardware, there's a really, really famous strategy letter from one of the Stack Overflow founders. He says, like, I think 20 years ago, he quoted, if you want to sell more hardware, you have to make the complement product cheaper. So if you sell a printer, you have to make sure the printer driver is as cheap as possible and as easy as possible. Then you can sell more printers. If you want to sell a power supply for a charging station, it should be easy to be integrated. So you want to donate a driver for your power supply into EVerest, power meters, contactors, whatever it is. Car OEMs want to see their cars flourishing on the market. They want to have it compatible. They're voluntarily testing with EVerest and investing there. So this is our surrounding view, and I'm pretty sure you can match that to your own industry. And actually, it's broader, without going to the details, but there's even more parties who have interested in that. Maybe a little bit more loosely coupled, like academia. They need playgrounds, like the sanitization bodies. They need, sandbox for trying out new ideas on standard in real code to make sure they actually work. The good thing is, if you are the sandbox and you are the industry default sandbox, as soon as they think, okay, this sandbox feature is fine, they can release a standard, but then your code is released before. So you have kind of a code first, standard second strategy. And we're also pushing that. And then you have to gain momentum. You have to advertise and marketing this. Some people don't want to hear like, oh, marketing, you have to deliver on tech. Yeah, there's a saying, you have to do good and talk about it. And that's what we also try to do a lot. So you have to win big and well-known names and in your industry and utilize them. And if you, won the first Tesla, then it's easier to win, ABB or someone else afterwards. You want to get prominent advisors and advocates which talk about you in the industry, which put your name down. For example, we got the former CTO of Audi and Volvo, and that's also a trust anchor. You want to utilize all possibilities, opportunities on social media, on webinars. You want to go on conferences and trade shows, and in particular, sorry to say that, not so much on the open source ones, they're also fine, but your actual target audience is your industry. I don't know what is eWorld, some distro tech, for us it's Power to Drive, you know those places. You want to be in the target, you want to address the target directly. So whoever you know, just talk to everyone. Don't keep the idea under the carpet. Maybe someone steals it from you. That will not happen. You have to push that forward. You have to be in the working groups of all the standardization, because you will be the mirror of those standards. So you have to engage as much as you can, as early as you can. Yeah, and you have to do that internationally. There is for open source no boundaries, so do that global. And sure, you also have to think about how to make money. I stole this from a venture capital fund specialized in open source. There's different options. You can take screenshots, but basically you can offer services. You can do some open core-like business models, like feature-based hosting, or paid distribution, or multi-licensing. While I don't like that multi-licensing approach, I think it hinders you on creating an ecosystem. So I'm not in favor of that. Or you can find someone else who sponsors that because they have a strong interest of having this industry you are in cleaned up. I think that's what most people do. But you can also try to make money with this. And I think there's nothing wrong with this. Yeah, so and just to recap, why do I think this actually worked out at the end? We have the right problem space, and this is more or less cross-vendor connectivity. So it's not within one vendor, and there's continuous innovation pressure. So you can't wait for the problem to resolve itself because it's stacking up. You need the right game plan, so open source focus, and industrial adoption focus. I need a right acting player, neutral positioning, like LF Energy. You need a lot of funding. And you need to have nothing to lose. So if you, at the same time, try to protect your legacy business, and then you have to do strategic decisions, I think this would be in your way. So either you have no legacy, or you're willing to go all in regardless. Yeah, and yeah, as I said, go all in, think big, think cross silos, and invest a lot. What's your next big thing?